more than 300. Add in superdelegates, and Clinton is just under 200 delegates shy of the number needed to clinch the nomination. But neither Sanders nor his supporters seem ready to concede. At a news conference Sunday, Sanders appealed to the Democratic Party's superdelegates.
It is virtually impossible for Secretary Clinton to reach the majority of convention delegates by June 14th with pledged delegates alone. She will need superdelegates to take her over the top at the convention in Philadelphia. In other words, the convention will be a contested contest. We believe that we are in a very strong position to win many of these remaining contests, and we have an excellent chance to win in California, the state with far and away the most delegates. Where Secretary Clinton and I strongly agree, and where every delegate to the Democratic Convention strongly agrees, is that it would be a disaster for this country if Donald Trump or some other right-wing Republican were to become President of the United States. Therefore, in my view, it is incumbent upon every superdelegate to take a hard and objective look at which candidate stands the better chance of defeating Donald Trump and other Republican candidates. And in that regard, I think the evidence is extremely clear that I would be the stronger candidate to defeat Trump or any other Republican.
Today, we're going to take a look at the new movement called Bernie or Bust. A recent McClatchy-Maris poll found 1 out of 4 Sanders supporters say they would not back Clinton in a general election. About 70% say they would support her. Speaking last week at a victory rally after winning primaries in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Delaware, Hillary Clinton appealed to Sanders supporters.
Because whether you support Senator Sanders or you support me, there's much more that unites us than divides us. We all agree that wages are too low and inequality is too high, that Wall Street can never again be allowed to threaten Main Street, and we should expand Social Security, not cut or privatize it. We Democrats agree that college should be affordable to all, and student debt shouldn't hold anyone back. We Democrats agree that every single American should and must have quality, affordable health care. We agree that our next president must keep our country safe, keep our troops out of another costly ground war in the Middle East. And we Democrats agree that climate change is an urgent threat. And it requires an aggressive response that can make America the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. And we Democrats agree on defending all of our rights, civil rights and voting rights, workers' rights and women's rights, LGBT rights, and rights for people with disabilities.
The division among Democrats who support Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton recalls the 2008 presidential campaign and the staunch Clinton supporters who joined together under the acronym PUMAs, or Party Unity My Ass, they said, vowing never to back her then-rival Barack Obama. Well, for more, we're joined by 2 guests. Mike McGinn is the former mayor of Seattle, serving from 2010 to 13. He hosts a podcast on social change called You, Me, Us, Now. He is a Bernie Sanders supporter, but will support Hillary Clinton if she becomes the nominee. Shawant is a socialist city council member in Seattle, member of the Socialist Alternative, a nationwide organization of social and economic justice activists. She also is a Bernie Sanders supporter who says she will not support Clinton. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Shawant, let us begin with you, because you really started this whole Bernie or Bust campaign. Explain what it is.
So I just wanted to clarify, myself and Socialist Alternative, we did not launch the Bernie or Bust campaign. We launched what was called Movement for Bernie, movement with the number 4 Bernie.org website. But we are very much in sympathy with the sentiments that have been expressed by the people who have initiated Bernie or Bust, which is that it's really kind of a bankrupt strategy to say that all the people, the millions of young people who have been politicized, for the first time in their lives because of Sanders's message of a political revolution against the billionaire class, should now all hunker down and support Clinton. And, I think the analysis that we need to have really has to flow from some essential points. One is this is a historic moment and a historic movement, really. Since the Occupy movement, what we're seeing is a tremendous fundamental shift in American consciousness, and that is an anger against corporate politics and a desire to fight against the establishment. On the other hand, you're also seeing the ascendancy of Trump, which is, I think, on everybody's mind, the rise of this right-wing ideology, Islamophobia, bigotry, and I absolutely find it terrifying. But my problem is that if we are looking for a real strategy to break working people away from Trump, then what we have to do is present a real alternative. And Sanders is right, Bernie is right. In poll after poll, repeatedly and systematically, he has done remarkably well in terms of the fact that if he was to be the Democratic candidate, he would deliver a thumping defeat to Trump. Why is the Democratic Party establishment not doing everything in their power to promote his campaign? That's the question that people should be asking, and that's why I would say, as a socialist, that we need an independent party for the 99%, and the fantastic way to begin that process would be for Bernie to run as an independent throughout November.
Have you talked to him about this?
I have talked to him personally, yes, and I think that at this moment, as we all know, he has said that he has indicated that he will probably endorse Clinton, and Clinton herself is, understandably talking about how his supporters need to support her. But I would challenge this idea that all the supporters that were behind her, supporting Obama, that's the same thing as Bernie supporters supporting Hillary this year. I don't think it's fundamentally the same situation at all. Bernie is calling for a political revolution against the billionaire class. Hillary is the epitome of the political establishment that has promoted the interests of the billionaire class to the detriment of the interests of working people. Bernie is calling for single-payer health care. Clinton is the woman who said, well, you can't do single-payer health care. And she's being honest. That's a rare moment of honesty for her, because on the basis of supporting her and the establishment, no, you cannot win single-payer health care. Unfortunately, though, for us, on the basis of supporting her and the Democratic establishment, you can't defeat the right either.
Mike McGinn, you are a diehard Bernie Sanders supporter, but you feel differently if it was Hillary Clinton who would be the nominee. You would support her.
Yes, that's right. And I'm definitely an early Bernie Sanders supporter, and I would say a diehard one. I'm not a diehard Democrat by any means, and that's one of the reasons I supported Bernie. In fact, I believe I endorsed Shawant in her re-election campaign just this past year here in Seattle. But the reason is that I look at the differences between Clinton and Trump and what a disaster Trump would be. And I want to see, I look back on the election where, I remember us thinking then that Al Gore, he was just too corporate and he was just too Washington. And as I look at the lack of progress under Bush, all of the mistakes that happened under Bush, I would have liked to have Gore. And one of the things I would say to Sanders supporters is that the presidential race, it's not the game, it's just the scoreboard. And this is a high watermark right now for, the movement that Shawant stands for, and many of the things that I believe in, and that we need to return power to working people and address racism and get really serious about climate change. And that energy can move to a lot of other places besides this election, and clearly the differences between Clinton and Trump lead me to support Clinton in this election.
Mm-hmm. What is most distinct for you in the differences between Clinton and Trump?
I mean, on the quote Sherman Alexie, the dog whistle became an air horn on racism in the Republican Party, and I just find that absolutely horrifying. I look at our city and how wonderfully diverse it is and how we're struggling to work together to address problems, and there are big divisions. I just look at a Trump presidency as being so divisive and wrong for this country. And, you know, Hillary Clinton clearly has shifted positions over the years, but a powerful movement, I believe, can lead and push her to the places where we'd like to see the country go.
We're going to break, then come back to this discussion. We are talking to Mike McGinn, who's the former mayor of Seattle, and Shawant, who is a Socialist City Council member here in Seattle, Washington. This is Democracy Now! We'll come back to this discussion about Bernie or bust in a moment, back home in New York on Wednesday. We urge you folks to keep listening and watching Democracy Now! As we discuss the presidential election. In February, Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump came under criticism for wavering on whether or not he wants the support of the former Ku Klux Klan leader, David Duke. He was speaking on CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper. Trump refused to disavow Duke's support or the support of other white supremacists.
Well, just so you understand, I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know, did he endorse me or what's going on? Because, you know, I know nothing about David Duke. I know nothing about white supremacists. And so you're asking me a question that I'm supposed to be talking about people that I know nothing about.
But I guess the question from the Anti-Defamation League is, even if you don't know about their endorsement, there are these groups and individuals endorsing you. Would you just say unequivocally you condemn them and you don't want their support?
Well, I have to look at the group. I mean, I don't know what group you're talking about. You wouldn't want me to condemn a group that I know nothing about. I have to look. If you would send me a list of the groups, I will do research on them, and certainly I would disavow if I thought there was something wrong. But you may have groups in there that are totally fine, and it would be very unfair. So give me a list of the groups, and I'll let you know.
Okay. I mean, I'm just talking about David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan here, but...
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know David Duke. I don't believe I've ever met him.
That is Donald Trump being challenged by Jake Tapper on CNN, whether he would unequivocally disavow support from David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan. Our guests are the former mayor of Seattle, Mike McGinn, a Bernie Sanders supporter, who, though, if the nominee were Hillary Clinton, will support her. We're also joined by Shawant, who is a Socialist City Council member here in Seattle. She supports the Bernie or Bust campaign. So here you have the Republican frontrunner, the presumptive nominee, Shawant, who can't quite get himself to say he wouldn't accept the support of a Klan leader.
This is absolutely horrifying, the idea that a right-wing, misogynist, racist, bigot, anti-immigrant, Islamophobic, multi-billionaire could gain any traction in the minds of regular people. And what I find about this remarkable is not only that it is stomach-turning, but it is also really terrifying in the potential it might hold, not just for Trump ascending in any given way. I don't think he's going to win. I think, you know, statistically speaking, I think Clinton is likely to win. But what's scary about this, I think, is what most scary is the fact that any space for this kind of right-wing hateful agenda that is given in politics, in the political discussion and discourse, what it means is that there is a potential for building an ongoing base for right-wing ideology, and that's what scares me the most. In fact, history is a guide. If you look at what happened with the Tea Party ascending in 2010, the reason they made such gains is not because America is turning right-wing. The mass of America is not right-wing. The mass of America is actually well to the left of U.S. Congress and well to the left of the Clinton-dominated Democratic establishment. What has happened, though, and that's what the Tea Party's ascendancy shows, is that people are angry at the establishment, angry at the bailouts of the bankers, the very bankers who almost completely destroyed the economy, and working people losing day after day. And people are looking for, grasping for a way to fight back. And Bernie Sanders' campaign, the fact that tens of millions of people have rallied around his message for a political revolution, this is absolutely historic. Some of the speeches Bernie has made are probably the most radical on mainstream television since MLK gave his his Riverside speech, many years ago, decades ago. And
speaking out against the war
against the war in Vietnam. The speech that really transformed politically and radicalized an entire generation at that time. We're seeing a similar phenomenon where an entire generation of working people, and young people especially, teenagers, who are getting politically transformed and radicalized. And it's not just Bernie. Bernie is, his campaign's the echo he has received is a sign that we are at a historic moment. And that is why I would say that for people who are scared of Trump, and I am one of them, I think we have to think intelligently about this, and supporting the very establishment that allowed space to be created for the right wing is like saying you're going to double down on a strategy that has failed in the past. I mean, Mike made a very good point. He did support my campaign as a socialist, but I was running as a socialist alternative candidate in 2013 and 2015, both campaigns that we won, as a challenge in defiance of the Democratic Party establishment that controls this city. Look at what happened in the state of Washington. All the superdelegates in the state of Washington are doubling down behind Hillary. But what happened in the primaries? Every county in the state of Washington went to Bernie Sanders in huge numbers.
So why are these superdelegates going for Clinton?
That really captures the character of the Democratic Party establishment. The bulk of the establishment, you look at the senators, the Congress members, superdelegates, all of whom are all on the side of Clinton, virtually all of them, virtually none of them, very few of them on the side of Bernie. That shows you that the party, the Democratic Party, is out of touch with the base of tens of millions of people who are looking for a shift away from corporate politics.
Well, Mike McGinn, you support Bernie Sanders, but you'll support Hillary Clinton if she gets the nomination. Does that concern you, this utter alienation from the majority of people in your state who supported Bernie Sanders in the poll here, in the caucus here?
It does concern me quite a bit, and that's one of the reasons I'm a supporter of Sanders. And I was really looking for a word that I could disagree with what Shama was saying, the alienation of regular voters and regular people from the Democratic Party is a huge problem, and this election has really exposed it. In fact, the amount of success that Sanders has is absolutely astounding, and it's only going to become more and more as the years progress, if you look at the demographics of who his supporters are. But again, that energy can be used in so many different places to elect local elected officials, to push for changes, in state houses as well, and to bring pressure to bear on Congress and a new president. And that's why I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, which is that the presidential election isn't the game. It's just the scorecard. And this is a high watermark, and this is indeed an historic moment. As a young man, I was working for a U.S. congressman in the Reagan era. And it really feels like it's changing. And I can also say, as an elected official, who was not the darling of the Democratic establishment in the city of Seattle, anybody who follows us knows that, because I was pushing really hard for change. I needed the people behind me to make change happen.
Explain how you won. You beat an incumbent.
I beat an incumbent. I raised questions about a mega project, a major boondoggle, which is supported by the chamber and all the powerful interests. And I did beat an incumbent and win. I did not get much support from Democratic elected leaders, but I got support from voters because of my platform. But in office, I needed that pressure from the public in order to go where I wanted to go and to accomplish the things I wanted to accomplish. So does Shama, and so will any elected official. So it's the movement that matters ultimately more than the elected official. So I am 100% with Shama that this movement has to continue against inequality and racism and the anti-immigrant stuff that we're seeing from Trump. But I would say to Sanders supporters that the most movement here will be in ensuring we have a Democrat who might listen to us than having a Republican who we can be assured won't, but take that energy to the state and local elections. Take it to the ballot, which has seen great successes here in Seattle, which is the threat of the public voting directly. And I don't think this is the high watermark. I don't think the Sanders campaign is the high watermark. It's the sign of an advancing tide. and we're going to continue to see change into the future, changes that the Democratic Party will have to respond to or become irrelevant.
Last month, ahead of the New York primary, I went to cover a Bernie Sanders rally in the South Bronx. Thousands turned out for it. And afterwards, I spoke to Rosaria Dawson, who had been one of those who introduced him, and I asked her about Sanders' path to victory.
This is it. You know, I'm seeing a lot of people already going and starting to, you know, talk to their superdelegates and talk to these different people and going, hey, like, this is not okay. You know, this is what happened. What happened was Hillary lost in 2008 because of her Iraq war vote, and she lost because a lot of election politics that went on that left a really sour taste in people's mouths. And she lost because of the delegates. And so rather than go, let's take that out of the system, she just started to work for it and started to get them on her side. And she started, before the primaries, having over like 400 delegates pledged to her. That is not okay.
So that was Rosaria Dawson, and a few weeks ago, actress Susan Sarandon caused a bit of controversy when she appeared on MSNBC with Chris Hayes, and she talked about Donald Trump perhaps being a better option than Hillary Clinton, though she says she was misinterpreted. This is Chris Hayes speaking with Susan Sarandon.
Isn't the question always in an election about choices, right? I mean, I think a lot of people think to themselves, well, if it's Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and I think Bernie Sanders probably would think this.
I think Bernie would probably encourage people because he doesn't have any ego in this thing. But I think a lot of people are sorry. I just can't bring myself to do that.
How about you personally?
I don't know. I'm going to see what happens.
Really?
Really.
I cannot believe that as you're watching the rise,
well, you know,
Donald
some people feel Donald Trump will bring the revolution immediately. If he gets in, then things will really, you know.
Oh, you're saying the Leninist model of heighten the contradictions?
Yeah. Some people feel that.
Don't you think that's dangerous?
I think that what's going on now, if you think that it's pragmatic to shore up the status quo right now, then you're not in touch with the status quo. The status quo is not working, and I think it's dangerous to think that we can continue the way we are with a militarized police force, with privatized prisons, with the death penalty, with a low minimum wage, with threats to women's rights, and think that you can't do something huge to turn that around.
That was Susan Sarandon, a major Bernie Sanders supporter, speaking on MSNBC. Talk about this whole approach, Shama.
Well, first of all, I think we have to be very, very clear. It would actually be dangerous and completely toxic for Trump, someone like Trump, to be at the head of this country, for us to have any vision of a just society, of a humane society. I think that is the idea of having Trump in the White House is completely antagonistic to the idea of building anywhere towards a just society. But I think the problem here is this. The problem is that the base of support that Trump has succeeded in getting, that base is regular working people who are angry at corporate politics, who are angry at the trade deals, who are angry at the fact that they're facing joblessness and low-wage jobs and that the billionaires got built on. It's an irony that another billionaire is the one who is trying to, drive them towards a right-wing ideology. But I think what's happening here is that, as you look at the example of the Tea Party, is that the logical fallacy of merely presenting Clinton as the alternative to Trump, here's the logical fallacy. Despite a reservoir of racism and real bigotry that Trump is, latching on to, the vast majority of people who are supporting him because they hate establishment politicians like Clinton. So it makes no logical sense for us to then turn around and say that the way to peel off all those working people who are supporting Trump is to present the very epitome of that establishment that they are so angry about.
So you're saying both Trump and Bernie Sanders represent the anti-establishment?
I think Trump, not intentionally, in a very cynical way, yes, in the sense that the vast majority of people who are drawn towards Sanders or towards Trump are people who are angry at the establishment. And really, if we fear the fact that Trump is experiencing a rise, and I fear that as much as anyone else does, then what we need to do is provide a left alternative to Trump, and Sanders is that alternative.
What do you see as his path to the presidency, Sanders?
Well, right now, I think there is, the media pundits are right about one thing, which is if you look at the numbers, in terms of getting the Democratic Party nomination, I don't think that is likely to happen. And so the question is, how do we move forward? I do agree with Michael that it is not just about this presidential election year, but then we have to think about what is the correct way to move our movement forward. Where do we take our movement from this moment that we are here, where Sanders is unlikely to win the presidential nomination? Does it make sense for us to simply say that, well, now we should all hunker down and support Clinton? What I am saying is that in order to build a real movement, first of all, we have to understand that there are no shortcuts. Just supporting one presidential candidate is not the answer. And I would go so far as to say that even if Bernie Sanders were, in some alternate reality, become the president this year, that would not be enough. We would have to actually build a real mass movement below. But the question is, what makes sense for this movement that we are trying to build in terms of what strategy we use for the presidential election? And that is where I'm differing from people who are saying that if you're worried about Trump, support Clinton.
So
what I'm saying, if you're worried about Trump, let's build a left alternative. And the first step is for Bernie to run all the way as an independent if necessary.
And if he doesn't run?
If he doesn't run, we have
as an independent,
we have to. Yeah, I mean, this is not about.
Who would
Bernie.
you vote for?
Well, I will vote for the most viable, most powerful left challenge to the Democratic and Republican party establishments. And so if that is Jill Stein from the Green Party, then that's who I will be supporting. But at this moment, my concern is, can we build a really powerful left challenge? And if there was any possibility of Sanders and Stein running together on a Green Party ticket, let me tell you something, that would be absolutely historic, and I would wholeheartedly support that.
Mike McGinn.
So my approach on primaries is always, in the primary, you pick the candidate you love and you really want to advance. And in the general, you just have to pick between who you think you like better. And that's kind of the way the process works. And then you have to take that energy and try to get that next person to win a primary and come out of it. You want to get the people you love into positions that they can win. And that takes a lot of work between elections. Again, I reflect back on the Gore-Bush race. And we were all skeptical. Many people were skeptical of Gore, that he was too tied to the establishment. And I remember back then, you know, how uncomfortable it was to defend him against an attack from the left from Nader, that he was too tied to the big money and the status quo way of doing things. But I look at the Iraq War, I look at the lack of progress on climate. I think Al Gore would have had some convictions that we could have benefited from as compared to Bush. And that would be my fear here. You know, I believe Hillary Clinton has some convictions that we could benefit from, and I think Trump has some convictions that scare the hell out of us.
As a Bernie Sanders supporter, what advice do you have for Hillary Clinton?
I think she needs to listen to the fact that that young people, and in particular, are just fed up and disgusted with a system that's leaving them with so few choices, that lower class, you know, working class people are getting hammered. We have a looming climate crisis. It's time for some boldness. It's time to listen to the voices of the people that are really getting it hard right now, and listen to the kids who are going to have to grow up in this future we've created. Listen to them and change and go there. Go towards the future, not towards protecting what's been, but where we need to go.
Bernie Sanders says he would support Hillary Clinton if she were the nominee. You disagree with your own candidate, Shawant.
I disagree with Bernie on several things, and this is one of those things I disagree on. I mean, Mike mentioned the question of climate change and convictions to fight big oil, but where is the conviction on the part of Hillary Clinton? She has defended the fracking industry over and over again, and she has doubled down on that. So if we are really looking to fight climate change, we need a strategy to break away from big oil. That is why we need to start building an independent party for the 99%. So I would urge everybody to go to movementforbernie.org, where I have my petition urging Sanders to run as an independent. And if he does not, then we have to continue building our movement for independence from the Democratic Party establishment and from the Republican Party.
We're going to have to leave it there, and I want to thank you both for being with us. Mike McGinn, former mayor of Seattle, and Shawant, the Socialist Seattle City Council member.